All right, so as we move into the actual buildup of all the stuff that will support the inventory, the very first thing we need for that is the pickup class, because we have the item, which is going to be the actual data stored in the array, but we have no way for the character to interact with that item. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to make a new C++ class. It's an actor, and we'll just call it pickup. And I'm going to put it in the world folder, which is, as I mentioned earlier when I created it, this is the folder that stores the different actors and such that are placed into the game world, like doors, pickups, traps, I don't know, buttons, switches, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going with, but obviously move it around if you want. Okay, now the pickup is done being added to the project, so we can go ahead and start modifying this. So now the pickup is going to have it's going to use the database, which I mentioned at the very beginning when we made the item data structs. It's also going to be able to be interacted with, so we need to inherit from the interaction interface that we created. Now to make it be able to be initialized from the data table, it's pretty easy. We need, let's see, first let me rearrange this stuff. Get rid of some of this, all this clutter. And I'm going to steal my little banners that I like to use. Okay, so now first thing we need a mesh. So pickup mesh. We need a data table. Now, because we're creating multiple different data tables that store categories of items and we're organizing those via item IDs, then it's pretty well sorted already for how you want an item to be set. You can say, oh, I want this to be a armor piece. And then from the armor piece data table, you enter the item ID, and there you go. Now your item's ready to go. We need an F name that's going to be I called it desired item ID. So you need both pieces of this. You need this to be typed in the editor, which will then be used to reference the row in the data table. Because if you remember, I talked about that when I made the data table, is that I made the item ID and the name of the row the same thing. So we can essentially pass this in when we find it for both the name and the row in order to get a specific row that we want. We need an item base reference, and I just called this item reference because this is the underlying item that the pickup will point to. We need a quantity. And we need the F interactable data, which I usually call instance interactable data, because this one allows us to set everything on each individual pickup. Then when the character aims at it, the interaction interface sees that for each individual pickup. We're going to fix all this in just a second. I'm just adding in the things and kind of talking about the big picture before I waste time with the UPROPERTIES. For the functions, we need, we do need some public functions. So we have the constructor, that's fine. We need initialize pickup. And this is going to take in a subclass of uItemBase and a quantity. we also need a function that I called initialize drop. Now, why won't we use initialize pickup to initialize a dropped item as well? Why would there need to be two? The reason is because when you have a pickup placed into the world statically, as in, you're building up your game map in the editor and you're laying pickups here in the game world, when you press play, you have the things you set in the editor, right? You have begin play, the function that can pull things from the editor settings and the details list and use that here. But what about if we're in the middle of the game and we drop an item out of the character? Well, that's creating a new item, pickup object, but we're not going to have the reference to this stuff that, the data table is going to be null because there's no way for us. I guess you could go through and use there's a class that's called something like F object finder helper, something along those lines. And it can actually search the paths of your content folders to find assets. That may be actually a better way to do this that I just haven't gone down that path. The easy way I found to work around this was to have the two functions. One of them will pull everything from the database and when you do begin play. The other one will pull everything from the already existing item reference when you do begin play, and then that's how it gets initialized, but then it has no data table, right? Because the data table really only matters when you first spawn the item and start the game. So that was the solution I went with. I probably will experiment in the future with the other method, like I said, of trying to use that special method to find asset references in the editor, but I haven't yet, and this works just fine, and I think it's really straightforward, and you'll see here shortly if you feel the same way. Let me go ahead and let me forward declare this stuff because it's red and it's just, let's see, will it let me do that quickly? Oh yeah, here we go, add forward declaration. All right, good. Writer, something else. Man, look at that. Okay, so we need a force inline function because it's just a simple getter. It returns an item reference and it's get item data. And what it's going to do is return item reference. And actually, I put all this stuff in public, but I meant to put this all down in protected. Because if you think about it, there's really no need to ever access much of this stuff from external to the class. Not that anybody really would, but it's just good practice for your C++ paradigms. Okay, and so that's all of the different properties and the main functions. Oh, nope, not quite yet. Let's see. We need to generate some overriding functions that are from the interaction interface. So that's going to be begin and end, and then definitely interact. Not really anything I can think of at the moment for a begin and end interact, special behavior. So I'm just leaving those out. And I will put these up here under public just because, well, the interact, probably not, but I guess there could be a time when you would want to call begin focus on something like, it's all just easily changeable in the future, right? So, okay, but we've got all the main properties now. We've got one more function. So we have interact, right? So I'm going to put a space here because these are the engine classes. These are the engine functions. We have our interact, but now we need what happens when we interact. We're going to call a function called take pickup. It is going to take in the CS tutorial character with a reference called taker. Okay. And that way we can, because the inventory is going to be part of the player. So when we take the pickup, we need to be able to interface with the character's inventory. Okay. That should pretty much be it to start with. So now I'm going to go back and put all the UProperties on these things. So let's see. So the mesh should be visible anywhere. It's in the pickup category. Components. And this is going to be, most of these are either going to be visible or edit instance. So let me just copy paste this just to get the format in. Now the item data table, definitely edit instance only, right? Because every single pickup we place in the world, we want to be able to customize separately. Same with the desired item ID. The item reference, that one can be visible anywhere because that's set by the data table. Quantity, edit instance only, and interactable data, edit instance only. Actually, sorry about that. This one is visible instance only. Why not edit? Because if it's something like a door, right? You have different stuff you'd want to type manually, or like a chest, because you shouldn't have a ton of those. But there's going to be a ton of items. But we already have in our item data table a text section that contains action and description and everything else. So we can actually just initialize this directly from the data table as well. And so it makes it pretty convenient. And so there's no need to edit it. Now let me fix some of these. So I'm going to call this category item database. Same with this one. And I can, this isn't really part of the database. I'll just put this will be item reference. It'll match the variable. And then this can be in the interaction category. I have this as a U function, I believe, because it may need to be bound. I can't remember why I put a U function on this. It may be unnecessary. You know what? I'll leave it off for now. And I think now we're good to go. Nothing else needs to be U function. This is all pretty much, all these functions pretty much used strictly in the editor. Okay, so let me go ahead now and generate definitions for all these functions that I have here. I'm going to move my begin play and my tick. Get rid of some of these clutter lines. Oop. Okay. Oh yeah, we don't need this. We don't need to call the interface itself. All right, so for the pickup in the constructor, the main thing we need to care about is the mesh. So we're going to create a default subobject. It is of type uStaticMeshComponent, and it can just be called pickup mesh. Now, one thing that I did when I was experimenting with this is I set physics to true, because I liked having the objects, have physics on them, be able to be kind of pushed around by the player, and when you drop something, it actually like falls to the ground. I thought it looked cooler that way. So, you can do this or you can leave it off. It doesn't really affect anything other than, it's your preference for right now. I don't know about, maybe at some point in the future, if you have a game with a whole bunch of pickups everywhere and the physics is trying to handle all of them at the same time, you know, that could be a performance issue or something, but I'll worry about that if it ever happens. Okay, and then I set the root component to be the mesh itself, because, you know, that way, you know, anything that happens to it is happening relative to the mesh, and that's what we're seeing when we, you know, see the pickup, and that's what we're interacting with, so it makes sense for it to be the root. Begin play, we are going to call initialize pickup, initialize, and we are going to take the uItem base static class, and we're also going to take in the item quantity, all of which will be coming from the editor, right? Because we're going to set the ID, we're going to set the quantity, we're going to call this, and then an initialize pickup that will give it the data table everything it needs. You know, it'll give this function everything it needs to get the item from the data table and spawn a new one. Tick, actually, there's no need to tick pickups, so we can actually go back and change primary actor tick, can ever tick to false, and just get rid of tick. I forgot about that. I forgot that I had deleted that. Yeah, if you don't need, if a class doesn't need to do something every single frame, just delete tick. You know, because there's no point. It's not going to do it. It's not going to use it. Okay. Initialize pickup. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to check if our item data table is valid, and we want to check if desired item ID is none. It's an F name, right? So this is the way to check, is it an empty string? Now this was saying, you know, is it empty true, right? We don't want that. We want it to be false, which will then become a true, right? Because it is saying it is not empty. So we want something in there, and we want the data table. We will get a reference of f item data, which, if you remember, that is the struct from the data table. Call it item data. You call it item data row, whatever you want. We're calling item data table find row, and this takes a template that will be f item data. And now what we're passing in is desired item ID and desired item ID to string. Now if you look at this function, it takes in an f name, which is the row name, and then a string, which is the context string. So if, actually here, I have it right here. So the row name is an f name, but then the context string I'm giving it is my ID, which is the desired item ID. And so, you know, if you had something, you know, since the first one is the row name, if you had something different for the row and then the first value here, then you would have to pass those both in. But since, you know, this is what I said about making it the same thing makes it simple. You just give it the same argument right here. Okay, so now this should successfully pull out our item. So then we need to create the new item reference that we're going to initialize. So we're calling new object, uItem base, where the owner is going to be this, and then it will take in the base class. Now, as I type this, I realize I'm passing in static class directly right here, but there's really not any reason, because initialize pickup is only called right here in begin play. So I'm probably going to tweak this later. I won't mess with it right now, but it's very simple. Just edit it. If you were to edit it in the header, all you would need to pass in is item quantity here, and then you could move this to right here and replace base class. So at the time when I first created this, I did not use the static class here. I didn't know about that yet. I didn't know how useful it was when you're creating a new C++ class from C++ code. So I had like set the item base class in the editor and then, used it here. And that's why this had an argument and so on and so forth, but it's unnecessary. Okay. So then what we're going to do is we're going to start initializing our internal pickup item reference with the stuff from the new item data table row. Okay, so just got all of those fields. It's pretty compact, because we're using the structs. So now the very last thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I haven't handled the quantity yet. So I'm checking if in quantity is less than or equal to 0. Then I'm going to set my item reference quantity to 1. Otherwise, I'm going to set my item reference quantity to the input quantity. And remember, ternary operator is Boolean, condition if true, colon, condition if false. My mesh, I'm going to call set static mesh. And the mesh is located at item data, asset data, mesh. So I forgot a function that we need. This is something that's used for the interaction. So it's update interactable data. This is an internal function to the pickup class that basically what happens is we have our instance interactable data struct right here. Now, when you first if you want to set everything dynamically, right, with this text data right here that we already have, you need to do that right here when it's constructed. So then that means the same thing. When we drop an item, we're going to have to do that, right? And then anytime it changes, so let's say, if the pickup quantity is, we pick up a partial stack, like there's 2, we pick up 1. We'll also need to make sure that it's updated properly then as well. So that's what's useful about this this function here, update interactable data. It will let you, oh yeah, here it is. It will let you have a quick and easy way to update the interaction card for the pickup anytime something changes. And so for update interactable data, we're going to do what am I typing here? Instance, oh my gosh. Instance interactable data type equals, this one is always going to be, we know this is always going to be a pickup, right? And so this is going to make sure that it calls the pickup section of our case statement, our switch statement in our interaction widget. We're then going to set the action equal to the item reference text data interaction text. We're going to set the name to the name inside the item reference. Quantity is just item reference quantity. And then the last thing we'll do then is we'll set the interactable data equal to the instance interactable data, right? Because remember, this is the one that the interface itself sees, which can then flow through over to our interaction widget. So now once you have that, you know, anytime something changes with the item, with the pickup, you just call this. And so that's the very last thing we need to do right here when we initialize the pickup. So what about initialize drop? So when we initialize the drop, we've already got a pre-existing item reference ready to go, right? We've got the pointer. We've already got this pre-existing item. We're assuming this is coming, you know, the drop is going to come from a player or something that has an inventory, something being like a chest or an NPC or something, right? So we already have the existing item to drop. So we will just set our pickup item reference to that. We will then set the quantity. Oops, again, you need to do a check. This is just a safety check, right? So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to take this, and then basically I'm saying, okay, is it less than or equal to 0? Then set it to 1, otherwise set it. Okay, so it's the exact same. And then we want to get our numeric data weight, set that to item to drop, get item single weight. We then set the mesh just the same way we did here, except we're setting it to what the, you know, whatever mesh the item to drop has in its data structure. And then the very last thing is, again, update our interactable data. Now this is called, you know, this is not for dropping the item. The drop function is going to come from the player for now. That's where the implementation of that is. But this is just, like I said, when we don't have a data table, instead of creating our item off of a data table, we're creating it off of an existing item reference. And so, you know, I think I ran into this because the very first time I tried to drop an item, I got a crash, right? Because it's like, oh, you know, you have no data table now because you're spawning this while the game is running. And so, like I said, this was just my go-to, you know, quick and easy solution. And I think it's not like inefficient or anything. It's just, you know, there's no harm in initializing. I feel like when you're dropping something and it's already in the inventory, it should be initialized from what's in the inventory rather than searching out a data table and initializing it from there when it really came from the player, or, you know, came from an inventory where something was dropped. Okay, this is almost done now. The last big thing is take pickup, but for right now, for the begin and end focus, we're going to come back to the interface test actor and basically steal exactly what he has right here. Because the only thing for begin and end focus right now in the pickup is to set the mesh, you know, to turn on the highlight. And so just fix that to be pickup mesh. And then interact, we're going to do a safety check. If player character, then we will call take pickup and we will pass in player character. Okay, so take pickup. So the very first thing that we want to do is we want to check, is this item in the process of being deleted? We only want to run the code if this is false, right? So this is just a check where you can see here, returns true if this actor has begun the destruction process. That's just kind of a safety thing. Pickups, right? Because what we're going to do is We're going to make the call to the inventory to pick up the item, which is really just looking at the math on the back end of the quantity and the weight and making sure the player can hold that. If we pick it all up, all we do is destroy this actor. And so, you know, in the case of the player like rapidly spamming the E key or something, they might run this, pick up the item, and then it tries to run it again, you know, when it's already in the process of calling destroy. So it's just kind of a safety thing like that. Make sure our item reference is valid. And then the last thing we want to do is, and this is going to be, there's going to be a little bit of placeholder code in here like we've done on some other classes that we'll come back and fill in. We don't have the inventory component yet, so I'm going to comment this out. But that's the name of the inventory component class, right? And it's going to be if we have a player inventory that's valid. So that's what's going on here. Okay, so comment that out for now, or don't worry about it and just ignore it. We'll revisit this and add it back in and make sure that it all works later on. So we're going to have this wrapped in another if statement, right? And then what we do here is just a little pseudocode / comment explanation. Try to add item to player inventory. And then based on the result of the add, we either, you know, we adjust or destroy the item, the pickup, right? Because, you know, when I say based on the result, everything that goes on in the rest of this function is part of the inventory class. We will call, you know, the function's called handle add item, and then it returns a status, and then we can examine that and take action, right? And so if everything gets picked up, then we destroy the pickup actor. Okay, so the main reason, so this is enough to start with, right? We'll come back, the inventory is going to be next, and then we'll come back and fill this in after, you know, we got to modify the player and do a few more things. But the main thing here is that we can actually test this out in the editor and see if an item gets created and initialized correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close the editor. And then I'm going to rebuild, make sure everything looks good, and then I can verify that my initialization here works correctly. Okay, so I'm back in the editor. Everything built successfully with the pickup class, but now I didn't, you know, back when I first showed making the data table, I had never gone back and actually filled it in with stuff. So I decided to do that real quick. Now I decided, okay, I started you know, if you've been following along, you know that I started by making a data table I called mundane items, and I basically left it all blank and everything. So I decided it's better to just have a test data table for now, where I can mix things up and not feel weird about it, just because I'm very particular like that. So I called my IDs, you know, test 01 and test 02. The reason is because all I really need is one item that's going to be stackable and one that's not. You can add as many as you want. That's just what I'm going with for right now. And we're using, you know, again, we're using the Infinity Blade asset pack. So I found this nice little potion in there. I think it looks, you know, I like the look of it for something like a health potion. I think it actually is called, yeah, regen potion. So then a while back, let me pull this up and show you. I found this thing for sale called the Game Icons pack, and it came with like hundreds of these icons. I think it was on Humble Bundle. And so I use this. They're a little like cartoony. There's something that, you know, they kind of remind me of like Torchlight, that game, those icons. So like there's one for potions, right? And if we go in here, you can see they're kind of like hand drawn. But this is where I got the icon. So I decided to use this icon for like prototyping and just kind of, early, I'm not planning on, I would want something different if I were to try to actually sell the game, because these are kind of common. But yeah, you can find these on the Unreal Marketplace, and there's probably like, there's other websites, there's like Open Game Art and other places, you can find icons. And if you don't feel like even doing that, one really simple thing you can do is you can open up the asset and just take a screenshot. I mean, it'll look a little bit ugly with this like background here, but we can probably you could probably even turn that off. Yeah, look, show grid, turn off the grid, and then can we move it? No, but still, I mean, now you just take this, you have the potion on a background with a little shadow even, come like adjust the angle here. There you go. That could be a totally fine icon image. So plenty of ways to handle that. I'm just going with these little pre-made hand-drawn ones. Let's see. I'll change it. I'll call it regeneration potion, because that's what the mesh is, and this will actually be good. We'll test out our interaction widget, make sure that it can grow and shrink with longer strings. Simple health regeneration potion. And then see, this is what I talked about in the past. Interaction is our pickup, usage would be drink if you're using it from your inventory. I gave it a weight of 2 and a max stack size of 5. Made sure to check this. And I filled out a few other things, restore amount 30, sell value, which, it's not used for right now, but. So that was that. The other one I made is a bucket, it's just a little, I'm using this little, where is it? This guy. So it was just something small and something that would not really make sense to be stackable. Although, I don't know, I guess if you have buckets do stack together pretty easily. But anyway, we're making a non-stackable bucket. Okay, and so those are my 2 items. So now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and find my pickup class, and I'm going to create a blueprint off of it. So this blueprint is going into my main blueprints folder, and it will just be called pickup base. Okay, so we've got it here. Now we can drag it into the world. Blueprints, pickup base. Now it's got, let's see, let's put the mesh as the potion. Okay, so there we go. And then let's see, did it have, okay, it had it selected, so I should be able to come down here. Yeah, here's my category that I made. Right, everything's going to be initialized internally, so it's grayed out because we can't use it. For now, this part, okay, yeah, this one's also grayed out. Okay, so quantity though, I will make 1 potion for right now in this one. In my database, I need to go and reference the line. So it was test 1, test 001, test 001. And for the data table, I'm using my test items. Quantity 1, don't need to worry about that. Don't need to worry about that. That should be it. Make sure the data table is set the ID, and set the quantity. I think I'm going to move this up here because it makes a lot more sense for these to go together, and then I'm going to take the item reference out of being visible. It's just kind of clutter, I guess it could be useful to leave it that way for troubleshooting if you want to make sure it's pointing the right thing. But this makes more sense to be grouped with the item database related stuff because you're setting it, based with the ID and everything. Okay, so let's play and see what happens. So here's our little potion, and can we aim at it? Oh, there it is. Press E to pick up regeneration potion, and you'll notice it did not show the quantity. This one shows the quantity, right? Because it's got more than one. This one, it's a single, so it did not show. Now it's also not, it's still highlighting. So I gotta sort that out. But it looks like for the most part, it's working well. Now let's do this. Let's copy it and make this one have a quantity of 3. And there it goes. It's got 3. Let me maximize this. My interaction widget there, it's slammed up against the side. That's not good. Oh man, this thing is too small. Okay, so you see, this is what I mean. More tweaks are always needed on the UI to make sure that it acts correctly. Okay, but now let's say, you know, what if there's one more piece that I think is crucial in this. What if, you know, every time I go to edit this thing, let's say I want to use the bucket now. Every time I go to edit this, this is still a potion. Now if I hit play, now it pulled from the right thing, right? Press E to pick up bucket. So that worked well. But here, see here in the editor, the mesh is set to the potion. That's a lot of clicks if you were to make, imagine that you had made an area with 1,000 items to discover. You are going to have to, you know, it's bad enough that we got to type our IDs for every single thing we place, but also having to put the mesh here. So there's a way around this that's actually really nice. And so I'm going to save what I have and close the editor and go back into the C++ code, and I'll show you a cool trick. So first, let me tweak these database. Let me tweak this stuff. So item reference, yeah, I guess I still will leave that one. But quantity, that one is going in with the item database. I wonder if it's better to call it like item initialization. I like that a little bit better. Okay. So now we want the mesh, we want to dynamically update that mesh, right? Because we don't want to have to go and make it match what the item ID is every single time. The way you do that is the editor has some built-in functionality that when a property is changed, it actually can obtain a reference to that property. So what we're going to do is we're going to, it's an override, so I'm going to use my override function, but you can also type it directly after I show it. It's called post edit change property. Not this one with chain in the name. There should be another one. There it is. Post edit change property. Get rid of public because it's definitely not going to be public. Now this will, you can see here, it's got this event, property changed event. This will essentially store a reference to the last thing we tweak in the editor. Now, we don't ever want this to be able to be accessible by shipped code, right? This is purely an editor thing. So this is purely for someone who's manipulating the game in the editor. So there's a macro you can use that is if with editor and then an indif underneath of it. And what that'll do is it'll basically say if you're compiling in the editor, you know, building one of the editor modes, it will build this. Otherwise, it will completely skip this and it will not compile this. So now let's generate the definition. And now, so here's what you're going to do. We're going to get the name of whatever the change property was. So we have this event here. So do change property changed event property. And this is another ternary operator. If property changed event dot property get fname. So it's basically saying, out of this property, is it valid? If it is, get its name. Otherwise, return name none. Right? Because if somehow we click on something that doesn't have a name or is not seen as valid, we don't want to still try and return something from that. If our changed property name is equal to, we're going to use this macro, which is another one that kind of checks validity of things, keeps it safe. And the class name is pickup, and the member name will be desired item ID. Right? Because we're basically, checking, if it's equal to the desired item ID in the pickup class, and if our data table is valid, oops, typo, we want to create a context string. Why am I doing this? Seeing my code has extra steps. I guess it kind of does keep it clean. Sorry about that. You'll see what I mean here in a second. Context string, and it is desired item ID to string. If we get a valid reference from that data table, right? This is essentially the same thing we're doing up here when we initialize the pickup. It's basically this, right? So I can copy this. If we get a valid row where we pass in desired item ID and context string, and see, yeah, there is definitely no need for me to create this string here. That's kind of what I was saying. I was like, why did I do this? Oh well, optimizing on the fly. If we get a valid row, I forgot one more parentheses. Then we set pickup mesh to item data, asset data, mesh. Now again, just to recap this, right? It'll see, this is like a delegate. It'll see that something changes in the editor. It's going to get the name from whatever changed. Make sure that it's going to say, okay, does that match the desired item ID in the pickup class, the thing that was changed? If it does, try to get the resulting item from the data table and set the mesh of the pickup to that mesh. Now let's see this in action. All right, so I'm back here in the editor. Everything compiled. And now we can test this right now. Because that post edit change property runs, like I said, based off of this, right? So if I want to, let's see, what did this one have? So yeah, now item reference is its own thing, and item initialization is now a category, which I like. So here's the one that had a single. All right. Excuse me. Okay, so now we want to see, will this update our mesh? So test02, enter. Bam, look at that. That is just a pure convenience thing, right? But it really helps a lot when you are editing multiple items and you want to, for one, this tells us right now our data table is valid and set. But two, it's just so much less clicks and having to mess with this and drop down, everything. And, again, you could completely, it always triggers off of this. And if you put in something invalid, right, you get a warning here from find row, but nothing bad happens. So then we'll put it back to the bucket, hit enter, and there you go. So yeah, that works really nicely. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember I had used this one as the example to show why, it doesn't work. And so this one's still set to test02. Okay, so now let's see. Let me tweak the interaction widget And I think at this point, the pickup class is done and ready to go, with the exception of the stuff we put in a placeholder here for when we actually take it, right? Because this is going to call, like I said, this is going to call inventory functions now. So we're down to that point. But now we actually have something to interact within the world, look at, and then call inventory functionality when we interact with it. So first, let me go in here and sort this out. Okay. So what I think is happening is the size box max width was not wide enough. So I'll actually set this to 500 and see if this fixes it. Oh, it's not gonna go full screen. This did not fix it. Why is this not fixing it? Why is my size box not resizing? Let me tweak this and come back with the solution here in a second. Okay, so it really wasn't a huge deal to fix. It was just a little bit annoying. So basically, back here in the size box, I was mistaken when I built this. I thought that we did not want size to content, but size to content is what controls these min and max desired right here. So basically, I had to put some padding, because when you check this, you'll see that everything constricts down to the content, which is the text. And so to add a little bit of padding, I put some back onto the vertical box here. Just gave it 5 on the top and bottom, and then 8 on the left and right, because I thought that it looked a little bit still too close to the edges with 5 on the left and right. So that's what I did right there. But now if you look, let me maximize this. Now, oh yeah, I changed the name of the potion so that I could verify that it actually is filling in correctly. And so there you go. It's got the full long name, including the quantity, and everything looks good. And the bucket, everything looks good. It's resized down to being, just enough for the text of the bucket. And then there you go, there's our physics enabled. Kick that thing. Okay, so that concludes the setup of the pickup. And now finally we are ready to create the inventory class and start in with some inventory math. So yeah, that'll be a fun time.